The Bellaventure, Stefano, and even the SS Florizel all worked together to rescue the stranded men. After 54 hours, the ordeal finally ended. Survivors were transported to hospitals, while the bodies of the deceased were stacked on decks due to limited space. Panic had spread in St. John's as thousands awaited news of the missing crews. When the ships returned, the horrifying sight of stacked corpses confirmed the scale of the disaster. In total, only 55 of the 132 men who had initially reached the Stefano survived, with one more dying in the hospital shortly after, bringing the total loss to 78. At the same time, another tragedy struck. The SS Southern Cross sank, taking 174 men and over 35,000 seal pelts with it. In the first days of April 1914, St. John's lost 251 men. Survivors suffered life-altering injuries. Many required amputations due to frostbite, including Thomas, who lost both legs. George was fortunate to escape relatively intact physically, though the psychological toll was immense. The disaster prompted a formal inquiry which criticized George, Westbury, and Abram Keene for poor judgment, though criminal charges were avoided. Abram bore the brunt of the blame for sending men back onto the ice prematurely, giving flawed directions and failing to calculate accurate positions. Despite this, Abram returned to sealing for another 20 years, regaining respect and capturing over 1 million seal pelts. The disaster sparked widespread reforms in the sealing industry, introducing safety measures to prevent a recurrence of such tragedy. The 1914 sealing disaster remains one of the most harrowing maritime tragedies in history, a stark reminder of the deadly power of nature, human error, and the unforgiving North Atlantic. By analyzing the Armada's logs and combining them with modern knowledge of wind, tide, and ocean currents, historians now understand how the Spanish, though technically skilled and disciplined, fell victim to nature. The Gulf Stream, unbeknownst to them, slowly carried their ships eastward, masking their true position. In a series of tragic miscalculations, ships found themselves beached and battered, far from safety. The survivors faced a harsh landscape, hostile weather, and an unforgiving coastline. Thousands perished, yet those who returned brought stories of endurance, skill, and the merciless power of the sea. The Armada's legacy became a lesson in the limits of human planning against nature's vast and unpredictable forces. The Armada's disastrous navigation and the deadly Gulf Stream created chaos that even Medina Sidonia could not control. Ships thought to be safely progressing toward the Atlantic were, in reality, being pushed inexorably toward Ireland's rocky coasts. Senior officers, including Marcos de Aramburu, meticulously recorded positions that, in hindsight, revealed catastrophic miscalculations. What they believed to be hundreds of miles offshore was in fact dangerously close to land. Aramburu's logs describe the confusion and exhaustion aboard the vessels. Crews were battle-worn, starved, and dealing with structural damage. Every effort to regain course into open waters was thwarted by the invisible force of the Atlantic drift. Even experienced sailors could not compensate for the unseen current, which eroded their westward progress by miles each day. Over 10 grueling days, the Gulf Stream's influence rendered navigation based on dead reckoning fatally unreliable. By early September, the Armada faced the inevitable. Despite attempts to avoid Ireland, several ships were wrecked along its shores. Storms battered survivors, while others drowned attempting escape. These losses represented almost half of the fleet that had departed Spain, a stark reminder of how natural forces could decide the fate of armies and nations. No enemy gunfire, no tactical misstep by the English could have caused such widespread destruction. Historians now recognize that this tragedy was the result of both human error and environmental factors. While Elizabethan England celebrated a perceived victory, the truth lay in the intricate interplay between human skill and the overwhelming power of nature. The Armada, disciplined and well-equipped, had been undone not just by superior English ships, but by the currents, winds, and tides that the Spaniards could not anticipate. Ultimately, the Armada's ordeal highlighted the vulnerabilities of even the mightiest fleets. Battle, technology, and strategy could only go so far. Nature remained the ultimate arbiter. The misjudgments of 1588 left a permanent mark on naval history. teaching future generations the critical importance of understanding the seas they sought to conquer. In the aftermath, historians piecing together the Armada's route can now explain how so many ships ended up wrecked along Ireland and Scotland. Medina Sidonia had ordered strict adherence to formation and caution near coasts, yet the Gulf Stream defied all human planning. Aramburu's accounts confirm that even with careful observation, the ships were unknowingly pushed off course. Dead reckoning, a method dependent on speed, direction, and time, was rendered unreliable by the powerful and invisible ocean current. As the Armada struggled northward, the remaining fleet faced relentless winds, high seas, and tidal forces that made controlled navigation nearly impossible. What might have seemed like a slight miscalculation became a deadly error over days. Sailors, exhausted from combat and harsh weather, could not respond effectively to sudden changes in wind or wave height. The Armada's cohesion began to fracture as small groups of ships drifted apart or were forced aground, each incident compounding the fleet's vulnerability. Despite these disasters, the Armada retained a degree of discipline. Commanders continued to prioritize the safety of the fleet and adherence to orders, but survival became the primary concern. Even ships that were not wrecked had to endure damaged rigging, leaking hulls, and diminishing supplies. The combination of fatigue, inadequate provisions, and storm damage made the return voyage perilous. Those who survived the Atlantic crossing did so only through extraordinary seamanship and a measure of luck. Ultimately, the Armada's failure was not a single event, but a cascade of misfortunes. Strategic missteps, overconfidence in navigation, and underestimation of environmental hazards combined with the raw force of nature to dismantle one of history's most formidable fleets. 4 centuries later, modern technology allows researchers to simulate the conditions the Spanish faced, confirming that the currents, tides, and weather patterns played an indispensable role in shaping the Armada's fate. The lessons of 1588 endure. Naval history is not solely a chronicle of battles and firepower. It is a study of how human skill interacts with the unpredictable power of the natural world. The Spanish Armada's tragedy reminds us that even the greatest empires are vulnerable to forces beyond their control, and that survival often depends on more than strategy and courage. It depends on understanding the environment in which one operates. In examining the Armada's final journey, researchers note that even seasoned sailors like Aramburu were unprepared for the severity of the Atlantic currents. The Gulf Stream, relentless and invisible, effectively erased much of the progress the fleet believed it had made. Aramburu's logs reveal a repeated pattern. Perceived headway was illusory, and the fleet drifted dangerously close to the rocky coasts they had been instructed to avoid. This invisible adversary turned routine navigation into a perilous gamble. The Irish coast proved particularly unforgiving. As ships ran aground, crews faced not only the fury of the sea but also a hostile terrain. Local reports describe Spanish soldiers and sailors struggling to survive on unfamiliar shores, many succumbing to exposure, starvation, and injury. Within weeks, nearly a third of the Armada's original strength was lost to the treacherous northern coasts. What had begun as a disciplined military campaign became a desperate struggle for survival. Meanwhile, the remaining fleet continued the arduous return journey northward into the Atlantic. Medina Sidonia's careful planning, which had emphasized avoiding danger along the Irish coast, was now rendered irrelevant by the combination of weather and currents. Ships had to take the long northern route around Scotland, adding weeks to an already exhausting voyage. Supplies dwindled, morale suffered, and the crew's physical condition deteriorated. It was a grueling testament to human endurance in the face of overwhelming natural forces. Historians now agree that the Armada's near-miraculous escape from complete destruction was due in large part to luck and quick adaptation. While English naval tactics and artillery inflicted damage, the decisive factor in the ultimate survival of portions of the fleet was environmental. The reversal of winds at critical moments allowed ships to escape being dashed on rocks or trapped by the tide. Yet even with favorable winds, navigating these northern waters required exceptional skill, and many ships were simply overwhelmed by circumstances. The Armada's legacy is therefore twofold. It demonstrates the evolving nature of naval warfare, how speed, maneuverability, and firepower interact in combat, but also underscores the unpredictable influence of nature. The fleet's misfortunes on the Irish coast in particular illustrate how a seemingly minor miscalculation in navigation, compounded by ocean currents and storms, can have catastrophic consequences. It serves as a stark reminder that mastery over man and machine does not guarantee mastery over the sea. In the end, the Spanish Armada's attempted invasion of England in 1588 was not defeated by cannon fire or English tactics alone. The combination of new naval strategies, heavy artillery, and the skill of English sailors challenged the Armada, but it was ultimately the natural elements and navigational errors that sealed their fate. The Gulf Stream, misjudged distances, and fierce northern storms drove many ships onto treacherous coasts, where lives were lost and vessels shattered. The fleet that had left Spain so proudly returned with significant losses, a humbling reminder of the sea's power. Elizabeth I's England survived, not through outright annihilation of the Spanish forces, but through a blend of innovation, environmental fortune, and the resilience of its sailors. Historians now understand that the Armada's near success and subsequent catastrophe highlight both the limits of human planning and the uncontrollable might of nature. Ultimately, the Armada campaign of 1588 stands as a defining moment in naval history. It showcased the importance of ship design, artillery, weather awareness, and strategic adaptability, yet it also emphasized the humbling reality that, in maritime warfare, even the most meticulously planned invasions can be undone by forces beyond human control. The survivors of the Spanish Armada carried the lessons of that voyage back to Spain, forever aware of the unforgiving seas and the critical role of navigation. Bloodied but not entirely defeated, the Spanish Armada's journey home illustrates a timeless truth. The oceans are as much adversaries as the enemy fleet, and even the mightiest of human forces can be humbled by the vast and unpredictable natural world. I truly hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing for more content, and I'll see you in the next one.